Hey horror movie fans, for our latest review for October, we're going to do a double bill. We will be reviewing the original Orphan film from 2009, and then we're going to be reviewing the recent sequel as well, Orphan Kills. In the original film, as I said, from 2009, Vera Farmiga, Peter Sarsgaard, they play a couple who recently they lost a child of their own. So they're quite eager to add another child to the family, and they visit this orphanage. And this character of Esther, who seems a very, very sweet, very fragile sort of girl, played by Isabelle Fuhrman, who was very young at the time. And they adopt her, and as in a horror movie, certain things start to happen. It starts appearing she's not quite what she seems. There's certain incidents at school, certain incidents with the family, and there's a bit of a rough relationship with the brother in particular, who's not happy for her to be around from the start, and he's very antagonistic. You have the daughter who's a moot, and she's a bit more on board, a bit more friendly with Esther. But there's a whole mystery, and then there's a twist later on in the film which actually reveals what exactly is going on. But we obviously build to Esther stirring up tensions in the family, including in the marriage, disagree over what's going on and maybe what's causing all this. I think Kate starts to suspect that Esther isn't quite right, and she's maybe up behind some of the stuff that's happening and going wrong, and John sort of feels differently. And you also have this issue of Kate's past with like alcoholism, things like that. So she's recovering from alcoholism, and that sort of plays in the plot as well. So Rachel, first of all, I'm assuming you'd seen this before, and then how did you feel about it when you saw it in the past, and how do you feel about it now?
I first saw this. Oh, I think I saw it actually quite close to when it first came out. So back in 2010, 2011. And I remember quite liking it. I always like Vera Farmiga. I think she's really good value, and she's always, a good actress. And I think her character and her particular storyline with her alcoholism and having a stillborn child. And I'm pretty sure it's also heavily implied that her husband cheated on her as well. So, she's got a lot of shit going on. And I think she does a really good job of portraying Kate and Kate's paranoia. I also think Isabelle Fuhrman is so good in this role. When you're doing creepy children, you need a really good actor to kind of portray the creepiness and, the subtle little hints that this kid isn't quite right. And I think Isabelle Fuhrman does such a great job. And I think that a lot of the imagery in the film is really powerful, like the opening scene. Like when I rewatched it recently, that opening scene of the nightmare that Kate has with her stillborn baby is really horrifying. And I'd actually forgotten about that. And so rewatching it recently, I found myself enjoying it a lot. Now, we obviously need to get into spoilers, and obviously for this movie we need to get into a big major spoiler. But for me, the best part about the film is that reveal towards the end of what Esther really is. So obviously you spend the majority of the movie thinking, is this kid evil? Is she possessed by the devil? Is this like another Rosemary's Baby situation? But no, you find out she's actually a fully grown adult who just looks like a kid. And I think that reveal was so interesting and so different, I think, to a lot of the evil kid films that I actually really liked that reveal. And I found watching the movie again, knowing the reveal is coming, makes things a hell of a lot creepier. Like there's a scene where there's like a thunderstorm and Esther goes and gets like their actual daughter, and she goes into the bedroom and she's like, "Mummy, Daddy, we're scared. Can we come into bed with you?" And she's like, "I want to sleep next to Daddy." And when you know that she's actually a 30-year-old woman who's like kind of wants to seduce the dad, like scenes like that become so much creepier. So I think that it's one of those movies that is made better by its reveal. You know, like, I mean, up until the reveal, it's still a pretty good movie. You know, it's still got a lot of creepy scenes. You know, it's still got a lot of scenes that make you really uncomfortable. Esther herself is such a little psychotic character. That scene, like, and when you see her kind of like sowing like this the seeds of discord between the parents, and it just kind of builds and builds and builds, and you have that scene where she breaks her own arm, and it's like all sorts of messed up, but it's just made so much better, I feel, by that actual reveal. And I think that was just really unique, like little spin on the demon child kind of trope. So how about you? Did you first see this movie when it came out in 2009, or was it a more recent watch for you?
No, it was more recent, and I'll say this actually because I did do a review for this a few years ago, and yeah, I sort of this film has grown on me since then because at the time I didn't really like it, and I like it more now, definitely on this watch. It definitely has its issues. Like it's quite unique and it's quite different from a lot of other horror twists. So the twist does make sense, and it actually explains some of the stuff you see in the movie because there's certain scenes where Esther is sort of overpowering people, and
Yeah.
you do question that at the time, like how this young girl can do this. And so then it does actually make sense when you get the reveal and the twist to it. So the twist I like. I think the film is made better by the standard of the acting.
Yes, definitely.
The acting is very good. I think, yeah, Isabelle Fuhrman is a real natural in the role. And I think I most enjoy it with her when she leans into being just a full-on sort of villain.
Yeah.
Like there's some entertaining lines with her in those scenes. Vera Farmiga is very good. Like Peter Skarsgård, he's really good, but I always see him as a villain. So sometimes that's a bit distracting because I always sort of place him as a bit of a creep. And
I agree.
It's one of the things I was going to ask you whether his character was meant to be a douchebag or not.
I think to a certain extent,
yeah.
Yeah.
Because obviously there's also the scene in the park where he is sort of flirting with that other mum. And,
yeah.
And yeah, at times he doesn't come off great. Like
no, he's not very sympathetic to his wife, you know.
No.
It's like, especially when she starts. I mean, I know it seems a bit odd, you know, like all of a sudden your wife is like suspecting like a little 11-year-old girl that you've just adopted, or 9, however old she is. But like the fact that the husband is so like against her, you know, and I know that she's got an issue with drinking, but like a lot of the tension between them, it definitely comes across like the husband is just being like a douche. Like, this is your wife, man. Like, you know, like maybe give her the benefit of the doubt. But the fact that he's so against her and he brings up her past and he brings up stuff like that, it's like, yeah, I think he is supposed to be a bit of a douche. I think we're definitely supposed to be more sympathetic with the Vera Farmiga character than with Peter Skarsgård's character.
Really frustrating that they don't believe her, like, at all.
I know,
all this
right?
stuff is going down, and they won't even consider the possibility that Esther could be, because it's the therapist as well. And
yes, yeah,
I think one of the weaker parts of the film is the sort of cliche over her being a drunk and that background. And
yes, definitely.
And sometimes I think these movies play up to that too much. It's the wind down the drain at one point where she's gonna start drinking it. But yeah, I thought it was a bit lazy, the script in those sorts of scenes. But I did find it really irritating, and they couldn't even see the other side of things.
No,
Especially the therapist, because you would have thought
yeah,
all people would have been
maybe a
more
little bit more,
open-minded,
yeah.
balanced.
No, they definitely lean into the whole, the mother's crazy, she's been drinking, she doesn't know what she's talking about, you know, trauma over losing the child. But yeah, I agree, it's definitely a tired trope, and it can be quite frustrating to watch it play out when you know what's going on, and you have the inside knowledge. So I definitely agree that that's a bit of an issue. I do think, the moments of horror in this film are quite, can be quite good. There's a few shots of, like, Esther looking really dodgy, and the bird scene where she gets the kid to kill the bird. Like, I do think that, like, you see the son, like, he's shooting, what's he shooting, like paint pellets or something, and he shoots the pigeon and he injures it, and Esther's like, well, you've injured it, you have to kill it. And it's like, look, I kind of understand where you're coming from, but by the same token, this is like a 10-year-old kid. But then when she actually does kill the bird, it's like an extreme kill, and it's like a little precursor to what she does to the nun later on. So it's like, I think those moments are really good. And I think that the daughter, the mute deaf daughter, and her silence is quite effective. The way that she witnesses some of Esther's crimes, but she's being kept silenced by Esther. I think that kind of threat is very interesting, and that works really well. I think that Isabelle Fuhrman really makes this movie, her performance and her eeriness as Esther slash Lena, when we find out her real name. And I think she's just so good. And the reveals surrounding her are so good. When she takes off the necklace and the wristbands, and you see the marks and stuff, things like that, I think are really effective in the movie. I do think that it does drag out a little bit, especially towards the end. I think climaxes in these movies can sometimes drag out a little bit too much, but for the most part, I think this movie is actually quite enjoyable. And I think that, when they came up with this concept, it was really interesting. Did you know that a year after this movie came out, like, a real life kind of version of this happened? So bizarre.
No,
yeah, there was this couple in the US who adopted some kid and then became convinced that she was, like, actually a 30-year-old woman, and they, like, left her alone. They ended up getting charged for, like, child abuse or something. It was nuts. So I don't know if they were like taking inspiration from this movie or what, but it was really bizarre.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. But
yeah,
because I think this twist must be based on a real, quite realistic hormonal
like it,
type,
doesn't it?
condition. But I was going to ask you something you sort of touched on, because I think one of the things I struggled a bit with in the movie was deciding how much of a, like, just an entertaining horror movie it was trying to be, and how much of a straight drama it was trying to be. I wasn't quite sure, like, because that's something the new film does, which we're going to talk about. I think the new film just has fun with the premise, like, it just runs with it from the start, sort of thing. And it might partly be because once you've had this twist in this movie, you can't really play it too straight anymore. But I don't know, at times I wasn't quite sure about the balance of that. Like, maybe rather than just running with the horror of it, maybe it became a bit of a typical
family drama.
No,
I agree. I definitely agree that there is, the balance does swing a bit back and forth. I mean, even, like, the movie opens with that really horrific scene, but then it goes into a more, like, somber kind of, like, we lost a baby and all of this. I do think that the film does get a bit muddled. Like, maybe it should have lent more into the horror, maybe a little bit more around Esther, maybe some more incidents. But I definitely get what you're saying, because it does at times feel more like you're watching, like, a family drama that just happens to have a few horror elements rather than, like, a flat out horror film. So I think if you were to judge this as a horror film alone, it may not be as good, but if you try and see it more as, like, a drama with horror elements, then maybe it becomes a little bit better that way. But I do agree that there was a bit of a balancing issue with trying to find that right kind of balance between horror and family drama.
Daughter more than the son. The son I did find quite annoying. Um,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
her
So
actress, I thought was quite good.
she was
The
very
deaf
good, wasn't
daughter.
she? What's
Yeah,
her name?
because it's always
Yeah.
hard to play that.
Max. Max is a little
Max,
girl.
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like him so much. I found him quite annoying, and I don't
Mm.
know if it's because the actor wasn't the best or
Something to do with
just
that. There's
a
also the
little
fact
bit
that, you know,
grating.
yeah, like I know he was ended up being, you know, right, but the fact that he was antagonistic towards Esther, like right from the
Too
beginning, again,
early
feels,
on, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It was like, okay, well, you're just being kind of a douche, you know? Like, I mean, I understand that, you know, adopting an older child into an already established family has got to be a little bit difficult. There will be frictions. But showing the kid being so against her, like right from the beginning, is a little bit much. Whereas Max is, you know, before you know that anything's gone down, Max is actually quite
Yeah.
sweet. And I like that scene where Esther first comes to the house and she like signs hello to Max because she's been practicing it in the car. Like, I think they build, you
Okay.
know, that well initially. It's quite cute, but you know, the daughter is definitely a better character than the son, because the son's definitely like I think you're right. I think it's a little bit to do with that maybe the actor was not that great. I mean, kid actors are always a bit of a gamble, but I
Hmm.
definitely prefer the daughter to the son,
Yeah.
and was more invested in her and her storyline. So the daughter and the mother definitely better than the father and the son.
Sarsgaard is a really good actor as well. It's just because I'm so used to seeing him as creeps, and
Me too.
this
Yeah.
is like an in-between role where I was a bit unsure whether we were supposed to see him as more of a
Mm,
villain, and because obviously some of the stuff he was saying, you're like, well, okay, fair enough.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
then there's obviously, as the movie went on, I think for the sake of drama, they were ramping it up, and it
Mm,
just got a bit annoying that he wouldn't even
definitely.
entertain. And it just seemed like he was too naive to what Esther was doing and stuff as
Definitely.
well.
Yeah.
Favorite was actually the stuff in the playground with that bully.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
like the way that was directed, because it was almost handheld where you were following her, and there
Yeah.
was a nice little fake out when another kid jumped out, and I thought that was well directed. Because some of the kills or some of the scenes like that felt a little bit generic, like the one with the nun
Oh
uh,
yeah, when she causes the
on the
car to crash
road.
and then
Yeah, that wasn't
yeah.
great. Although, as I said, because of the twist later, the reveal, I, I sort of like quite enjoyed how brutal the actual death was,
Yeah.
and
Because the
how it
first time you
makes
watch
sense
it,
when you know the twist.
yeah, because before you watch it, before you know the twist and you're watching like this little girl do this, it's like, dude, what is wrong with this kid? So I think it definitely sets up, you know, that reveal to pay off really well. The brutality.
Yeah, I wasn't that into it. It felt like they're just amping up for the sake of stakes.
Yeah.
But the end, actually, I mean, although it was a bit over the top, I did
A little
enjoy
bit, but
it. Was, but I did quite enjoy the stuff on the ice.
on the
The
ice, yes.
the tension, the back and forth, and
Yeah.
visually it was all well shot. So I did actually enjoy that, even though it was a little over the top.
Yeah,
But
that's what I mean. Like sometimes climaxes get a little bit carried away, I think, but definitely an interesting set
yeah.
piece. Like you said, with the ice, builds the tension really well.
Did this trend a little bit of these sorts of horror movies that came out around this sort of time, where I think it would go for a bit more of a drama, and it would be,
Hmm.
again, this idea of a mother and a daughter and the relationship, where they would sort of cast quite a high class, actress in the lead.
Yeah.
But then I feel the problem with those films sometimes is then the other stuff around that isn't that good. Because I'm thinking of that one with Carrie Russell. Is it Dark Skies or something? It's from a
Hmm.
similar period. It might be a few
Okay.
years later, but I mean, that's more of a supernatural type one, I think. But I think there is a certain trend where they cast a really good female actress, and it's to give the film a bit of credibility, but then the film itself around that isn't that good outside of the lead. You can rate it before we move on to the next film. What would you rate it?
Look, I think this is a fairly solid film. Obviously, like we said, there are some balancing issues, but I do think that it is saved by the performance of Isabelle Fuhrman and also Vera Farmiga. I think those two are so good in their respective roles that they kind of elevate the film. There's some fun moments of horror. There's some fun moments of very, like I said, uneasiness, and that twist is really good. I don't think it's anything fantastic, over the top, going to change cinema, but I'd say it's a solid film. I'd probably go with 7.5 out of 10. I think it's entertaining. I think it's solid. It's well made. Not overly fantastic, but I think 7.5 is good. I find it quite enjoyable when I watch it. What about you?
Okay. Well, I'll go a little lower. I'll go 6.5. And this is obviously my second viewing, so I'll watch it again, and it might go up a bit higher next time, and gradually improve. Because when I first watched it, the score was way lower. I really wasn't that into it, so but it was a good one to revisit, and sort of interesting. Then we got a sequel, but because of the way this film ends, the first one, they obviously had to do it a bit different in the sequel to justify it. And so Orphan First Kill is the sequel, directed by William Brent Bell, who's most famous for the Boy movies.
Oh, I like The Boy. I didn't realize it was the same.
That's the same guy.
The Boy is another one that has a twist that's very interesting and different. So okay, that's cool.
It's another one we should do at some point.
Yes, we should, absolutely. Okay.
So Orphan First Kill is set in the past, and it's almost like I don't want to say it's an origin story, but it's obviously set before the events of the first film. And we actually see Esther at the start of the movie in an asylum. She escapes the asylum.
I was looking for missing kids in America, and she finds a missing child that she can pass for. And so she's not adopted by the family. They actually believe that she's their missing daughter.
Half to the original movie. I mean, you've got the father who's quite sympathetic. He's like he's a musician, isn't he? Because there's scenes of them. Artist. So you get some. Again, that sort of links back a little bit to the first film where there's
because she does the paintings.
In that. So there's that stuff going on with them bonding over that. But once again, you've got a similar thing where Esther is taking an interest in the male figure of the house type thing. And we're obviously going to get into the twist, but if up to a point it follows a similar path as the first film, but then there's a twist which I think makes it a lot more interesting. Once that twist happens, and they sort of run with that. Also, I'll just make a point of saying, because it's a little bit weird this time casting the same actress, because obviously she's now in her 20s, and they did this thing where it was a bit. I'm not quite sure how they did it. They just mixed and matched, didn't they, a little bit?
So basically, it was a mix of makeup, body doubles, and some CGI, some de-aging CGI to make Isabelle Fuhrman look younger again, which obviously it doesn't want. Like, I mean, if you look at her in the original movie when she's actually 11 versus this movie. That being said, some people did come up with some explanations for why she might look a bit different in this one. For example, the fact that she's been living in an asylum means that she's probably been treated a little bit worse. She's probably not eating as well, so she's a bit thinner, so therefore her face isn't as full, and doesn't look as childlike. And also they say, after this, she goes to the orphanage for like a couple of years so she can practice, coming across more like a child. So I have to say, I was a little bit worried about the CGI and the de-aging, but for the most part, I actually thought it was
too bad.
No, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. Like, it could have been like the creepy Twilight baby in Breaking Dawn, and luckily it did not look like that. So, it was actually all right. I mean, it wasn't 100% believable, I don't think. But I think if you stretched your willingness, to believe a little bit, it worked. I think it worked just enough for this film, and just leave it at that. But yeah, I was very surprised when they announced they were doing a sequel to Orphan, because I was like, isn't Isabelle Fuhrman like 26 years old now? How are they going to do that? But I didn't think it was too bad.
Continue to age? Like, does the 30-year-old woman continue to age? But obviously, physically, she doesn't age because, the body doesn't grow.
Yeah, I honestly don't know.
No,
I mean, it
it's
depends
just
on
something
whether or
I
not.
wondered.
Yeah, because I think her condition is a real condition. It's rare, but
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
it
it is.
does
Yeah.
exist. And I think people who have it, I've seen this little Indian girl that does actually have it. And she looks like a child, even though she's in her 30s. So I actually think it does affect even your features. I'm guessing, and don't quote me on this because I obviously don't know anything, but I'm guessing it's maybe one of those illnesses where she will age, but she will age very slowly. So maybe eventually she'll look like an adult, but it will take a very, very long time. It's definitely something worth looking into at some point if you're curious, but I don't 100% know because, not really well versed in the condition that she's got. So yeah,
Okay.
but
Fair enough.
it'll be interesting. But yeah, so this movie, maybe we should talk about the twists so that we can really get into.
Well, first of all, what did you think overall of the movie?
I liked it. I did enjoy it. I didn't like it as much as the original, and I think that's because you already have the reveal. So anything you do is obviously not going to be the same as the first one. But I did like the twist, because I thought, again, it was kind of similar to the first one, where I thought the twist really saved the movie, because until the twist, it was almost like we were getting kind of a repeat of the first movie, like you said, you had the wife who wasn't maybe as forward, and the husband who really bonded with the kid, and we even have an asshole son who didn't really connect with
who I'm gonna call young Timothy Chalamet, because he had I mean, I'd say a mix between him and Cillian Murphy, maybe, and
I can see
you've
that.
got this kid, basically.
Yeah.
That's
a good one. But up until the twist, I was thinking, oh, this is kind of a generic, rehash. But no, once the twist came into effect and they started to really have fun with that, I found myself quite enjoying the movie. I think this one, even more than the first one, leans more into a drama that just happens to have a few horror elements. Like, to me, it didn't really feel like a horror movie, but I still quite enjoyed it. So yeah, I thought it was fun, and I thought the fact that they put that twist in really elevated the film. What about you? How did you go with watching this one?
I enjoyed this. I think this actually does stack up pretty well against the first film. I feel differently, actually. I think it does lean into more of being a horror.
Oh, okay.
Like, I think to a certain extent, like we said, it's maybe going down a similar path up to the twist. But actually, I thought it leaned more into it, and a bit like I said earlier, I think because you've had the twist in the first film and the cat's out the bag, you sort of have to do something a bit more different, and you have to do something which leans into it more and plays with it. And I think they did enough with what they did to freshen things up. And one thing I'll say, which isn't really going in, well, it's going maybe hinting a little, but one thing that's actually interesting, and I guess we should get into the twist anyway, but is then you do come away being more sympathetic to Esther in this movie than you did in the last film.
I mentioned that, yes.
And I think part of it is because she is quite a cool, anti-hero type horror villain. But I mean, the other reason is plot reasons. But yeah, like, you do actually root for her a bit more in this movie, which I think is interesting, and I like that they did that. So yeah, the twist is, we all get into it. The twist is then they actually their daughter's dead, and they know this, and
Well, the mother and the son know. The father
sorry,
doesn't
the
know.
mother and the son.
Yeah, because you find out that the son did something to the daughter. Julia Stiles' character, the mother, she doesn't explain exactly what it is, but she says something about sibling rivalry got out of hand.
Yeah.
So the son killed Esther, the real Esther, and they hid her body and said she was missing and never told the father, which is really quite tragic, but I think that twist just, it's so good because it just turns everything kind of on its head, and kind of goes,
it changes the whole dynamics really, because suddenly it makes like the Julia Stiles and the son more the villains of the film.
Yes, absolutely.
And actually, like we said, you are suddenly rooting more for Esther. And it just changes things so that it doesn't feel like a carbon copy of the original.
But it's kind of cool that for a little while they're all kind of in cahoots, because as the mother points out, she's like, well, Esther can't go missing a second time, so she actually helps Esther / Lena to integrate into their family. And there's like a great scene where she's like doing her hair and instructing her on what to say to the psychiatrist, so that, but I think what it really does is it really explains why this family is so willing to believe that this girl from Estonia, who suddenly has an accent and only vaguely looks like their child, why they're so willing to accept her back. Because obviously the mother and the son, they can't exactly come out and say, this isn't our daughter, because we know where she is. And the dad is so broken by grief that you just get the idea that he would accept any substitute back. So you really see why they would accept this stranger into their house so willingly. So I think,
I think it is quite good fun watching how long they can keep this things going, and how long they can kind of work together and coexist, why it's in their best interest. But I think watching that slowly fall apart is quite entertaining. And it is very fun you have this battle between the two sides, which is really enjoyable to see play out. And Julia Stiles obviously is a really good actress, and she's
really good in this
she's
role.
very game, and her playing villains, which I don't think she's played that often, but you can tell she's having a lot of fun. And as I said, she does become the true villain of the movie in many ways. So
and it's interesting you mentioned before feeling sorry for Esther, because oh my god, the nastiness and ableism that is shown by Julia Stiles' character and the son, the way they both mock Esther and call her a freak. And there's that scene where Julia Stiles' character sees Esther with the husband, and she's like, oh, you really think that someone like you is going to be able to land like someone like him? And then she's like, no, I'm going to go and have sex with my husband, and you're never gonna get him.
Sort of mocks her, doesn't she?
And in that moment I felt so bad for Esther, because I remember thinking to myself, she might look like a child, but she's a fully grown woman, which means she'll have all the desires and urges that come with being a sexual, adult, but she'll never be able to find anyone that's not either a disgusting pervert, or wants her, because she, like, that's the only type of male she would be able to attract. So I did feel quite sorry for her there, because obviously physical attraction and wanting to be with someone in sexual desire is something that most people experience. And if you're stuck in a body of a child and the only people you're going to be able to attract are pedophiles or creeps, like, what must that do for you? So I think it helps to explain a little bit of Esther's psyche as well, and a little bit of why she is like she is and why she does this with the husbands. And so, it was a very interesting twist to feel sorry for Esther. I also really liked, we talked about the dad being a painter. I liked in the original movie, Esther does these paintings of the house, and then when they flick them under the blue light, you see that the house is actually up in flames. So I liked that this movie kind of showed where she learnt that from the father in this one. Remember, he showed her the paintings that have the different sides when you flick the light. So I thought that was a nice little link between the movies to show where Esther picked that up from.
Yeah, and I think overall they've got a good balance of introducing new things, but
Mm,
things which are sort of complementing things from the original. So things which sort of are doing a similar thing, but sort of put a twist on them from the original. Because obviously
mm.
that scene with Esther and the scene you mentioned with obviously her flirting with
Yeah,
the husband,
with the
but
dad.
then Julia Stiles sort of going upstairs and
Mm.
with him. It's like the reverse of the scene in the other movie.
Yes.
Obviously, the
Mm.
classic scene where Esther uses the F word,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's almost like a reverse of that, which is quite
Mm.
clever. So
Very
I
cool,
think
man.
they've quite cleverly used certain scenes from the original, certain things,
Mm.
and then just give them enough of a fresh spin. And also it makes sense a bit more. What was a bit more satisfying in this one when you got the twist is then I could actually get into more the characters with, I mean, not Julia Stiles because she's a good actress anyway, so I was still kind of with that character, although I think it made it more satisfying when she became a villain. But
Yeah.
with the son, because a bit like this, obviously he's not exactly the same sort of character, but
Mm.
a bit like the son in the first film, I was finding him a bit annoying and a
Me
bit
too.
sort of bland in a way. But yeah, when he became the villain, that sort of made more sense in a way.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, it was just a really good reveal. Funnily enough, I've seen this storyline before. There is an episode of SVU, Law and Order SVU, that almost has this exact storyline. A girl turns up out of nowhere claiming to
Mm.
be a missing sister, and it turns out no, the original sister was actually dead, and the mother and this other sister who killed her knew it. So I was like, I wonder if they took it from this SVU episode because it's almost exactly the same. It's really quite interesting.
There's
The way they play
also
out.
that. Have you heard that? Have you seen that documentary, The Imposter?
Oh yes,
Which
yes,
is,
I
yeah,
know the
that's
one that you're
such a
talking about.
bizarre.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that's
guy that turned up after X amount of years. Is that the one you're talking about?
yeah, and he
Yeah.
sort of masquerades as their missing
Yes.
son, and it's really
Yeah.
weird because he does look like a lot like him, like
Mm.
to the extent where you would think, yeah, this is ridiculous, but
Yeah.
it's obviously it's not him, but he sort of learns the mannerisms and
Mm.
yeah, yeah, no, yeah, for people watching, I recommend that documentary. But that has a similar feel to some of this. So clearly, there are real life cases that have had a
Mm.
similar feel to what we're
Crazy.
seeing. Yeah, it's crazy world sometimes, but
Yeah. It's an interesting look into like what grief does to you and what loss does to you, and like, I mean, I think a lot of people would say this, but it's as harsh as it sounds, I think it's always better when someone is dead rather than missing, because missing leaves you with no closure. So if someone you love is
yeah,
missing, and so I think like
I
this movie
agree
and like,
with that.
yeah, those sorts of stories, it shows you that you can be so desperate to get your person back that you may actually accept an imposter just because your grief is so big and the void that they
Sure.
left is so huge. And I think obviously that's what we see with the father in this movie. The father doesn't question anything
Yeah.
about Esther, the fact that she can suddenly paint like an expert, the fact that she suddenly has an accent, the fact that she maybe looks slightly different. His loss is so great that he just accepts whoever comes back. So, I mean, obviously, I don't think the movie's trying to get too into that, but it is an interesting
It
thought,
makes you think, yeah,
Yeah.
about certain things, and
Mm,
I agree with you because I think what tends to happen is then if you have this person in your life again and you think it's the original person, it just plays with your emotions more. It
yes.
like makes it worse when you later find out it's not the person.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
sometimes if you're resigned to not ever having them back, you over time you can move on with your life sort of thing. So
Mm, yeah.
yeah. But no, I did actually. I think part of it is then with this premise and some of the ideas is then when you put it on paper, it does seem quite silly and ridiculous. So I did appreciate that this film leaned into that, and it had fun. There was some good like black comedy moments.
Yeah, there were.
It got quite hammy at times.
Yeah.
Visually, it looked quite good. You know, I think he did a decent job with the direction. Stuff around the house, I thought, was quite creepy at times.
Yeah, I liked the house. The house was a good set piece because it was so big and there were so many different areas that you could go to and like shadowy places that you could hide in. So there were quite a few effective shots and cinematography in the house that I thought that was a really good set piece, and they had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, but it's just funny how at the start of the movie, you were maybe willing to see, I mean, obviously not Esther, but this girl as a villain.
Scene with the new art teacher arriving at the institution, and she comes in and she's getting introduced, and all of a sudden the alarms go off and they're like, Lena has escaped, and they're like, she's our most dangerous patient. You can't, they're like, stay in this room and don't move. And I'm like, uh-oh, Lena's in the room, isn't she? And she turns around and there's Lena just sitting at the table, and she thinks at first that she's just, again, like everyone does, that she's just a kid, and then everyone kind of comes in and she's got the pencil, and it's quite a tense scene. So I thought that was a nice, like, kind of establishing moment so that we can remember what Esther/Lena was like, that we're dealing with someone dangerous. I thought that set up the reintroduction to Esther quite well. I really liked that scene.
Yeah, I like that one actually, and I think it's when the film does that stuff more is when it's at its strongest.
Yeah.
And there's some nice performances, but like for a while after that, it's in danger of just becoming a bit too much like the first film.
Yes.
Like where they're playing it a bit too straight, but it obviously turns it around. And the second half especially I had quite a bit of fun with in this film.
And I liked the climax. I liked the climax of the mother and the son deciding, nope, it's time for Esther to go, and they have that whole big fight. And like, it was so funny because I'm watching the movie and I'm like, okay, I know technically Esther is 30 years old, but it really just looks like Julia Stiles is beating the crap out of a kid. Like it was, I was finding like the end fight, just like, oh my God, Julia Stiles is beating up a kid. Let's just calm down. And then of course, the climax with the house catching on fire, because they obviously referenced that in the original movie. And I like that we see how because she survives the fire, she then can adopt the persona of Esther, and we see how she ends up at the orphanage, ready to be adopted by the family in the original movie.
So it does have a little bit of an origin story. By the end, at least.
A nice little link to the original movie that makes it flow quite well. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I think they get about the right sort of balance, because sometimes these films can go overboard with links to the original film.
Yes,
but
definitely.
They did it just about the right amount. So, okay, so that's Orphan First Kill. I'm not sure why it's called Orphan First Kill, by the way. I'm not sure where First Kill comes from.
She's also not an orphan in this one either, so
the
whole title is just...
they obviously wanted the original title of the film, but I don't know where First Kill comes from.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Really, really bizarre. Yeah, it sort of makes her sound like more of a slasher villain. And
yes, definitely.
It's their first kill, but okay. So what would you rate it?
So I did enjoy this one, but I don't like it quite as much as I like the original. I think the original for me hits the horror notes a little bit better, and I do enjoy, I think, the characters a bit more in the original. But I did like this one. Again, I thought it was fairly solid. The twist, again, elevated the whole movie. So until the twist, I was feeling a bit kind of like, oh yeah, okay, this is kind of the same way. But once we had the twist, I thought the reveal was quite good, and I did quite like the ending. So I'd probably give this one probably a 6.5 out of 10. So just a little bit less enjoyable for me than the original, but still a fairly good movie, and definitely one I would watch again in the future. What about you?
Yeah, obviously I've been quite positive, surprisingly positive on it, and I actually think at the moment, at least, I might like it as much as the original. So I'm actually going to give it the same score. I'm going to go 6.5. Yeah, I think both films have their issues, but as I said, I do appreciate that this one from quite early on, especially when you get that twist, it does lean into the premise of the first film and the premise of this film, and it just has fun with it. And as a horror movie, I think the horror moments work pretty well. Julia Stiles is really a scene stealer in the movie.
I think she's definitely the best in this one.
She's great. Obviously, Isabelle Fuhrman is on good form again. It's a little bit weird because of the way they, got around the aging thing. But as you said, it's not too bad the way they do it. But yeah, I would say actually Julia Stiles becomes a really good modern sort of horror villain in this movie. She's very entertaining to watch. So yeah, I had a pretty good time overall. As sequels go, I think this is pretty solid. So yeah, I'll go 6.5 for this one as well.
Oh, look at that, we're in agreement today. Who knew?
Yeah.
It does happen occasionally, people.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. Okay, so that's Orphan and Orphan First Kill. If you've seen the movies, then let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Which one do you like better out of them? Share some of your thoughts. I know some people with this new one hasn't been as keen on the twist. Some people didn't like the twist, so that'll be interesting. So let us know if you feel like that and disagree a bit with us on the twist. So obviously, like and subscribe, share us out on social media. You can make a donation to the channel at the PayPal link, which I'll probably put on the video. If not, it's on the main channel. Also follow me on Letterboxd. The link for that is on the channel. So yeah, follow me everywhere. Rachel, if you want to promote your channel.
Guys, you can follow my YouTube channel, Rachel McDonald, video essays on TV shows and movies. My Tumblr and my Twitter accounts are both linked on my channel. I'm not on Twitter that often, but I am on Tumblr all the time. So come and follow me everywhere. And Keith will usually put a link in the description so you guys can find me easily.
Okay, thanks guys. Keep watching horror movies. We'll be back with more soon. Take care. See you later.